Hey class, um, going to have a discussion here for week 2, and you're going to have to forgive me because I just recorded all of this one time and there's a break in the connection. So if I get a little flummoxed in my talk with you, please forgive me, but I'll do my best to get through it all again here. So we're going into week 2 with educational principles, systems, and standards. And the objectives for this week, when we're done with the week, you should be able to describe the complex local, state, national, international regulatory and accreditation environments of EMS and EMS education. And also be able to describe the rationale for the roles of accrediting agency, licensing agencies, course approval organizations, and how all these checks and balances work. And I'll try to give you my landscape view of that. And we can have a discussion about that in the class. So first, in understanding it, the levels that are out there, we don't actually have too many international oversight organizations in our world. The various countries that are out there, maybe the accreditation body in the U.S. and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration with the National Education Standards, that one country standard may set the standards for other organizations. And sometimes it's just that first lead country and that first lead agency that really sets a tone for the world. In air traffic, English is the language for worldwide navigation, and English is the language for aircraft pilots all over the world. If you're going to fly around the world and pull into airports, the pilots speak English, as so do the towers. That's because of where aviation began and where it spread from economically. That's true in the world of oil. I mean, if you're going to buy and sell oil today, you do it in American U.S. dollars. That benefits the U.S. economy, and it also influences the geopolitical structure of the world. For some reasons, EMS largely got started with the paramedic movement to a great extent in the United States, and it set the standard for the world in that direction just by being first. Other nations of the world have very good EMS systems, and some are working in parallel, and some have evolved in their own directions. The British system has an axis of going from Great Britain through Canada down to Australia and New Zealand, and so those countries tend to align and have a sort of a nationalized system, but EMS is very close to the U.S., and the U.S. was kind of far ahead of them back in the early 80s with my exposure to their systems, but they're right up there today and doing very well. The Czech Republic has a great EMS system, as does, I believe, South Africa and some other countries of the world. Some countries are coming along quite strong. Some of the Arabic nations, United Arab Emirates and Saudis and so forth, are moving forward fairly quickly. Trinidad and Tobago is advancing pretty quickly in recent years and doing a great job. This is just in the 10 years of my exposure. I may anecdotally talk a little bit about some of those places and some of those events as we go through here. Now, the complex landscape wouldn't make a lot of sense without some understanding behind it. That is to say, why would you have a state regulatory agency with maybe offering licensing and then another organization doing testing, like a national registry testing, and another one doing accreditation, such as the Committee on Accreditation of EMS Programs, and still others doing course certificate accreditations, as in the American Heart Association and AMT and so forth. And if you look and go, isn't that an awful lot of overlapping and conflicting and creating a lot of hassles? Indeed, you can make that case, and it has been made, and there are great national controversial movements going on all the time with people looking and saying the federal government may take over accreditation, and everybody else in the world of education going, bad idea, really, really bad idea. And we can't think of anything worse than having one federal system doing licensing and testing and accrediting and setting every standard and going one size fits all for the whole thing. That might be an equally bad and crazy idea, but the question is why, and what would the thoughts be as to why that would be so, when in fact it might be cost efficient and be good? Well, the reasons why may become apparent as we go through the course. This course is all about the 30,000-foot view. This is the high view, not becoming an EMS instructor in the classroom, but being a leader of an agency, being a leader of an organization, a national organization, being a leader in terms of building the trend for a new standard of care or something. So that's how we look at these processes and these organizations and so forth. So in examining that, let's start with what are the national bodies guiding this? So in the world of EMS, we're located under Department of Transportation, under the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration as a division of the Department of Transportation. We're not under Health and Human Services, so that's awkward to begin with for us in the United States. Many places of the world are a little more rational, where EMS is under the Health Department and under the medical systems and health roles and care and so forth. So first we have that in the United States to consider, being under the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, setting our educational standards, and before that our national standard curricula and our terminology. We have at that national level our national registry, which does the testing. So one organization, the federal government, funding and developing and publishing the guideline for education, and an agency that's non-governmental called the National Registry of EMT, and it doing testing to produce a registry, not a license to practice, not anything else, but you've passed a certain test and met a certain educational standard that then gives you that portability to wherever you go to be recognized with that credential. Well, other national level organizations, then comes the accreditation side of things. So the national guidelines are there setting what the standard should be for education in the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and National Registry for testing it. But what about the training programs? What sets their standard? And that would be in the area of accreditation. First of all, we have institutional accreditation. Institutional would be like Creighton University here where I am right now is accredited as a full institution. North Central American Agency or Association, Accreditation Association is part of the Higher Learning Commission, recognized by the Higher Learning Commission, recognized by the Department of Education. That is all about getting federal money and federal student support, student loans, and that's the guidelines, and that's the government's concern at the federal level with education. The accreditation part then is to be recognized under that, but that's the whole institution. Each program then in the healthcare professions and some other programs can be accredited as programs, not part of that institutional accreditation. This accreditation at the programmatic level is done through, in the healthcare professions, the Commission on Accreditation of Health, Commission on Accreditation of Allied Health Education Programs, CAAHEP. That's your commission, and there's some 280 or so programs like cardiac tech, massage therapist, and dental hygienist, and all these kind of programs. So the American Medical Association, they have an accreditation for graduate medical education, and nursing has an accreditation and so forth. But for paramedics, we've got a committee with an actual board and an organization. A Committee on Accreditation of EMS Programs is a national board and a national accreditation body as a committee of CAHEP. So the Commission on Accreditation of Allied Health Education Programs is the full commission. Under that comes the Committee on Accreditation of just the EMS programs, and it has its own board of directors and structure and site visits. That EMS program accreditation should accredit all EMS education. All of the programs, be that this kind of course, the management course, the instructor course, everything. It doesn't accredit EMT courses. It just accredits paramedic courses at the moment. It knows that the mission should be to accredit full EMS programs, but it doesn't. And the job would be too big, too complex, and it's not there yet. The goal someday is to have the broader accreditation standard. So that's the programmatic accreditation. Programmatic accreditation going up to CAHIP, CAHIP not even necessarily being recognized by the Higher Learning Commission and the U.S. Department of Education. It's freestanding. One thing about accreditation, this is a key to let you know, is that it is not unheard of or all that uncommon for a handful of colleges or organizations to get together and say, oh, we'll call ourselves our own little accreditation body of the world's very best programs and schools of Central America or Central United States or whatever, and develop its own accreditation name and go, are you accredited? Sure. You'll see names of accreditation bodies. You'll see names of accreditation organizations. Don't believe them all. In the world of EMS, that's why we say this, in the world of EMS, the national accreditation body, the only one is the Committee on Accreditation of EMS Programs, as a member of CAHEP, C-A-H-E-P, Commission on Accreditation of Allied Health Education Programs. That's it. And that takes care of setting the standards for your program, that you'll have the right number of faculty, that you did the full curriculum, that you've got the rotations, they have all the agreements in place, all the bells and whistles. Down from the federal level is the state level, and there's your state approval. I don't know about all 50 states. You'd have to check your own individual states and specific organizations, but there is an approval and a licensing or a permission to operate within that state. It is fairly standard around the 50 states of the United States to have specific licensing and or certifications and approvals for EMS education programs to be able to teach EMS providers at the paramedic and EMT level and so forth. Then you got the professional organizations and associations too. These are non-governmental, but one in particular is the National Association of EMS Educators. This is where the 3,000 plus people who identify themselves as EMS educators, program directors, faculty, instructors, teaching, paramedic courses, whatever, they have these jobs in EMS, and they see the value of getting the publications, the national journal, being able to go to the national meeting, take specific educator courses, etc. And that's their network and link, so that if you go from one place to another, and being a member of the National Association builds your network of contacts and so forth. Another national organization, the National Association of EMS Physicians. They publish pre-hospital emergency care. That's the source of most of the journal articles that I've assigned for this class. And they have annual meetings, etc. too. And they've got a pre-hospital subcommittee. I haven't been a member of NIMSI, or rather NEMSP. I've been a board member of NIMSI, but not NEMSP. And then there's specific courses, like the American Heart Association approving community training centers, which then approve specific courses like basic cardiac or advanced cardiac life support, etc., pediatric advanced life support. The National Association of EMT has developed the Advanced Medical Life Support Program, Pre-Hospital Trauma Life Support Program. And there's NASEMSO, National Association of State EMS Officials, and they focus on the regulatory roles and regulatory standards and so forth. Each of these working within their own areas, setting national standards. The picture should start to be clear that if you relied on one federal agency working in one bureaucracy, it would be very narrow. By all of these organizations working in their own areas, their interest groups, they build and grow and develop with their own interests those standards and guidelines, and help to build the body of knowledge and the standard of care and the standard of education and training in their area. Now we'll get there. All of this is discussed from the standpoint of you being an organizational leader in the field of EMS, either within the EMS agency itself, a regulatory standpoint or otherwise, and you've got to think about it from a standpoint of credentialing. think of it from, you're going to hire this person, and in comes this person through paper introduction or walking in, and you post for a position, and there come their credentials. So they have a license to practice somewhere. Is that license valid? Is it current? Do you trust the piece of paper? I wouldn't know what a license from Kentucky or Canada might look like. I would guess high quality paper made with not something that had been photocopied, a good linen copy, tough to tear and all that, but I don't know what they look like, and I wouldn't know whether they're valid. Little holograph images might help and so forth, but with fancy photocopiers today and a little laminate, I couldn't swear that I know what a license is. I wouldn't trust a piece of paper. If you wanted to check on my license, and you could, you can go to the Nebraska site. Go to the Nebraska governmental site. Go in and go to Health and Human Services. Go in and check on licensing status. Very quickly find it. Look up a license. Type in the last name, Rainovich, and you'll get my current status, that I'm licensed as a paramedic and licensed as an EMS instructor. All there. That's the actual credential to start with there. And what about certificates? You know, you've been able to look and see my background printed up that I put in the course, and I could turn the camera and show you up on the wall there, and you might see, oh, maybe up there you can see doctorate and bachelor's degree, master's degree, etc. Yeah, could be. Well, do those pieces of paper count? They shouldn't count either. If you really want to validate the actual credentials, you should go to the college or university itself, contact them, call them, look at their website, look it up, and you can look and see, did Rainovich actually graduate with a doctorate in May of 2006? And it'll be there or not there. Well, it's going to be there. University of New Mexico. Anyway, do people falsify doctorates and various degrees and so forth? Yes. All too often, frighteningly so, and it does happen. And if you're hiring people based on their own self-reporting, you're going to end up hiring people that don't actually have the credentials that they say they have. When it comes to transcripts, what about their grades? How did they do? I mean, do you really want to hire somebody and be defending them later on for having made terrible clinical errors, and then the lawyer subpoenas their grades and gets them, and find out that they failed math and they failed this class in chemistry and all the rest of it, and you're trying to defend your hiring of that person, and you show them the transcript that they gave you, and it turns out that a number of grades were changed from F's and C's, and their GPA was for what was really a 2.1 to a 3.5 or something, and you go, wow. No, when you get a transcript, get it from the organization in a sealed envelope, sent directly from the organization. It's a standard of what you do. You check the credentials. You check the credentials by the original sources and the transcripts and the certificates and wherever they come from. You get their experience, and people fabricate curriculum vitae. They fabricate resumes. They fabricate where they've been and what they've done. So references and reputation and paper and first-hand actual checks all really, really count. Now, one of the things that we did, we used to take people at their word. This isn't all that long ago. I mean, 10 years ago, just took background checks and people filled them out and signed it. They said everything they're saying is true. Well, the clinical units really did it. Hospitals wouldn't allow anybody to come on the clinical unit. They put it in their agreements that you had to do a background check. And we got third-party background checks, which have become very easy to do, very inexpensive, very easy, doesn't cost a lot of money. And the computers go back in and check the state databases and look for criminal convictions, drug convictions, sexual convictions, anything wrong, any losses of license and so forth, and those things turn up. And I can tell you, I became quite amazed at the number of people with driving with, alcohol or drug charges and criminal charges, etc. And some of them done as a youth. under the age of 18 but still there, and you go, all right, so somebody has had a driving under the influence of alcohol charge from 3 to 5 years ago. Do you accept them into your class if you're teaching? Well, you can accept them into the class, except are they going to get a job? If you're actually out there in the world of EMS, do you hire the person? It was 4 years ago, it was a DUI, and many of us in this world might go there, but for the grace of God. I mean, have I ever had a drink and then drove, and oh my God, and it could have been charged, and bad things could have happened, and accidents happen and all that, and go, should I judge this person forever? Here's the point. The insurance company's going to judge him. You may not be able to hire somebody, and if you do hire them, you may lose your insurance. You need to know what your insurance status is. You submit the insurance in the background to check information and so forth. It's very possible that a person with a DUI can't get hired anywhere in the world of EMS, and how long ago was it, and all the rest of it. So that has to be taken into consideration, is the insurance liability risk of that. And we've had people with a drug charge and go, you know, you may not be hireable. We have hired people with drug charges. We have taught people and accepted them into our course with prior drug charges and DUIs and so forth, and say, the state of Nebraska itself, the agencies will look at how long ago a charge was, usually up to about 7 years, but it could be longer, and it depends on the nature of it too. A sexual predation, a rape or something like that, no, that's not going to go away. So depending upon the kind of charge it was, how long ago it was, what it was. I mean, do you want somebody handling money that had been a bank robber? You don't. Okay, so you check the background, you do the independent background check, you check the credentials, you don't take the piece of paper for a license, you go to the agency itself and actually get it. You don't take a transcript submitted to you by the person themselves, you go to the original agency doing it, and then we get to their experience. And what was their experience? People falsify, as they said, their curriculum vitae, jobs they didn't really have, blow up their jobs, responsibilities into 3 times what they were. The number of stories are almost cliche in telling you how embarrassing it can be for a place that hasn't fully checked the experience and so forth. So what the person gives you in their curriculum vitae has licenses and backgrounds and certifications and trainings. All of that is just a filter to get them to your doorway for you to start taking a look. It's your due diligence to check all of that out and go back and get all of it through a background check, everything. You've got to go back and look at it all. And then you get to the experience level. Do you believe it or don't you believe it? Well, you know, I got to tell you, real life example, people in Trinidad and Tobago, Kurt Peer and Carla Reed down there. And Carla Reed was wonderful. Registered nurse. Was working with the World Health Organization. Went down to Trinidad, the island nation down in the Caribbean islands, with Dr. Ron Stewart, and world-known physician who I knew very well and had been instrumental with my career. Worked with him in Pittsburgh, and Dr. Ron Stewart knew Carla really well and so forth, and she's down in Trinidad and Tobago, and Kurt and Carla call up to me and Creighton University, and I don't know them. Can we do a course down in Trinidad and Tobago with your university? And go, why are you calling me at Creighton University from that island nation? I mean, I definitely would like to go on a little eco vacation trip down there, and would love to get down and do that course, but you know what, I'm antsy about it. I mean, what if they're frauds? What if they're total frauds, and I get down to Trinidad and Tobago with a course, and they've signed up for a course with Creighton University to do this course, and we're going to do an EMT or paramedic course down there, and it's called an EMT course, and it's going to be wonderful. And they collect $1,000 from 20 different people who are going to show up for the course, and that's really great. And we've set it up, and it's all terrific. And I get off the aircraft and get there and get off the flight at the airport, and I drive over to the building for the course, and there's 20 people standing at an empty lot. all who have paid $1,000 for the registration for the course, and I'm standing there now with 20 people in an empty lot. And the people who arranged it there took the money. That's what's in my mind. So I got to credential them, and I got to figure out who they are, and I've got to do it from 2,000 miles away or whatever it is. All right. So I say to Kurt and Carla, well, who are you? Who have you worked with? And they're very modest people. They're very, you know, they don't pump themselves up, and they kind of go, well, you know, whatever. And so I get the number of the local ministries and that, and I call through the switchboards to get the local EMS, you know, governing it. There aren't really any governing agencies. There's no EMS system there. But I call the local bureaus, the version of the governmental regulatory bureau. Well, they validate they're in business, they exist, but that's all they can say. They don't give any judgment or values about it. And it was a nightmare trying to figure out who these people are and did they have a reasonable organization and what's going on and all that. Now, they could have paid for a ticket for me to go down there and visit them, but that was kind of pricey, and I didn't need to do that even yet. I didn't want to spend days traveling down there to say hello and see are they real, and even then trusting them on that basis. There's a reason for all this. So Carla had traveled down to Trinidad and Tobago with Ron Stewart, Dr. Ron Stewart, who I knew very well. She didn't tell me she'd worked with Dr. Ron Stewart. She'd worked with Linda Abramson. Linda Abramson, former president of the National Association of EMS Educators, had been on the committee for Advanced Medical Life Support textbook to be one of the authors and the committee chairs of that or whatever with National Association of EMT. So I knew Linda Abramson really well. I knew Ron Stewart really well. They didn't connect me to any of the dots as to who those people were. Experience, credentials, reputations, contacts, validation, those kind of things are really golden. So the pieces of paper help you, but who the people are and who can back you up and support you, letters of recommendation, actually calling those letters of recommendation people, talking to them, those are the things that count. Furthermore, we can get down to immunizations and then documentation history. And so you're going to hire somebody and they're going to come in, they have to have the OSHA training, they have to have the HIPAA training, HIPAA meaning patient privacy law in this country, HIPAA, U.S. Emergency vehicle. You know, I say, well, the insurance company may require you to have an emergency vehicle operator's course, EVOC course, but even if the insurance company doesn't require it, who do you want turning a key and driving your emergency vehicle unless they've had the proper training? I mean, backing up an ambulance, and especially an ambulance in an emergency situation, is completely different than backing up a car. Now, maybe it won't be so different when we get backup cameras in some of the vehicles, but, you know, if you have an ambulance that doesn't have a backup camera, that's a little bit worse and more complicated. So what are the rules in backing up? And how about driving with lights and sirens? Do you want an inexperienced person driving your ambulance with lights and sirens on? I mean, if you take the EVOC course, one of the things you learn in the EVOC course is that we can take a course and go out and put the cones out there, and you got to drive through the course, and maybe you can do it at 25 miles an hour, 15 to 25 miles an hour, and you do it safely through the cones. What we do now is you turn the lights and sirens on. It's just a driving course. Put in the lights and sirens, drive the course. The person goes out there and starts knocking over cones. Why do they do that? Because the lights and sirens trigger the adrenaline. The adrenaline changes the speed the brain is perceiving and changing the emotional status of the brain to set up the alarm system, and the person overdrives and goes too fast for the cones. Imagine now those cones are people and other vehicles and trees and so forth. An awareness of that on a driving course helps the person not do that in real life when they turn on the lights and sirens. And what about starting an IV or calculating a drug dose or reading an EKG? You'd be out of your mind to let me start an IV on you because they haven't started an IV in a while. You'd be much better off with a brand new person out of a course having started an IV. But when's the last person actually practiced their clinical skills, and what do they really know? And can they actually do a drug dosage calculation properly? Do they know your protocols? How do you know that? So your responsibility at an agency with its education and training is not only the paper, not only the reputation, not only the certificates and so the legal license to operate and the accreditation status of where they went to and what kind of grades did they have and what kind of accreditation did their program have and what kind of specific skills training did they have for mega codes or pediatric care or critical care transport or whatever it's going to be. But what about that specific skill? Can they read the EKG properly? Do they know your own protocols, and how can you assure that with your specific skills, testing, and so forth? And that's where field training officer, orientation periods, things like that come in. But that's coming up in the future. This was all about setting up a landscape for understanding the relationship of these national organizations, state regulatory agencies, licensing agencies, national standards organizations, and why they all exist. And I look forward to having discussions with you about this in the course. But I hope you haven't wasted your life too much thinking about this and going through this. Just setting the stage for where we are in week 2. Talk to you later.